The sound of crackling glass woke Lisa Johnson at 2:37 a.m. Through the thick smoke filling her bedroom, she could barely make out the silhouette of Rocky, frantically pawing at her arm, barking with an urgency she had never heard before. The 3-year-old German Shepherd mix wasn't just trying to wake her, he was trying to save her life. And not for the first time. Lisa had always been a deep sleeper, a trait that had concerned her husband Jack since their early dating days. "You'd sleep through the apocalypse," he'd teased, installing extra smoke detectors throughout their home despite their modest budget at the time. But no alarm had sounded tonight. The smoke hadn't yet reached the sensors. Only Rocky had detected the danger. Just 12 months earlier, this loyal dog had been trapped in a burning building himself, moments from death, until Jack made a split-second decision that would ultimately save not only Rocky's life that day, but the lives of his entire family 1 year later. Dr. Melissa Chen, the veterinarian who had treated Rocky after his rescue, had noted something unusual in her report. Subject displays extraordinary sensitivity to environmental changes, possibly hyperacute olfactory capabilities. Lisa had dismissed it as medical jargon at the time. Now, as she faced a wall of smoke with her children sleeping down the hall, those clinical words transformed into their salvation. But how did this extraordinary chain of events unfold? What invisible thread connected a routine fire call to a middle-of-the-night miracle that left an entire community in awe? The story began with a man who broke the rules and a dog who never forgot. Jack Thompson had been with the Riverside Fire Department for 15 years. Tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair that betrayed his 42 years, Jack was known for his calm demeanor during the most chaotic situations. Nothing rattled him, not collapsing buildings, not raging infernos, not even the time he'd had to talk down a terrified teenager from a 9-story ledge while flames licked at the windows beside them. His steadiness hadn't come easily. 20 years earlier, as a rookie volunteer firefighter in his small hometown, Jack had frozen during his first major blaze, a mistake that had almost cost his mentor, Chief Frank Dawson, his life. Frank never blamed Jack, instead spending countless hours helping the young man overcome his fear. "You don't overcome fear by pretending it doesn't exist," Frank had told him during their late-night training sessions. "You acknowledge it, respect it, then act anyway." On a frigid January morning, Engine 17 was returning from a false alarm when the call came in. 2-story structure, fully involved, no confirmed occupants, the dispatcher announced as they raced through the pre-dawn streets. Probationary firefighter Aiden Maxwell, just 3 weeks out of the academy, visibly tensed beside Jack. The kid reminded Jack of himself 2 decades ago, eager but terrified. "First big one?" Jack asked quietly. Aiden nodded, his knuckles white around his helmet. "Stay close to me," Jack said. "Remember your training." "Should be a standard knockdown," Captain Reynolds said as they arrived at the scene, the Victorian-style home already engulfed in angry orange flames that punched through the roof. Neighbor Elaine Winters, still in her bathrobe despite the freezing temperature, rushed toward Jack. "The Petersons are in Europe," she said breathlessly. "House should be empty, but I sometimes see their dog in the window when I walk by." "I'm going to check below," Jack shouted to Miguel over the roar of the fire, his voice muffled through his mask. He motioned for Aiden to follow Miguel upstairs. The rookie wasn't ready for a basement search. "Be careful," Miguel replied, hesitating. The two had been partners for 7 years, ever since Miguel transferred from Sacramento after losing his wife to cancer. They'd developed the kind of unspoken communication that only comes from repeatedly entrusting your life to another person. Miguel knew that look in Jack's eyes, the same one he'd had last year when they'd found the abandoned baby in that apartment fire across town. The basement was a maze of old furniture and boxes, thick smoke reducing visibility to near zero. Water from the attack lines above seeped through the ceiling, creating a treacherous, steaming obstacle course. That's when Jack heard it. A faint whimpering coming from behind a stack of storage containers. Following the sound, his flashlight finally illuminated two terrified eyes reflecting back at him. A dog, thin, trembling, and clearly struggling to breathe, was huddled in the corner, trapped by fallen debris. A chain dangled from his collar, suggesting he'd broken free from where he'd been tethered but couldn't escape the basement. Jack felt a surge of anger toward whoever had left this animal restrained in an empty house. "I've got a live one!" Jack called into his radio. "Canine, basement level, east corner. Thompson, get out now!" Captain Reynolds' voice crackled back. "Structure's becoming unstable. That's an order." Jack looked at the dog, who stared back with desperate eyes. Protocol was clear. Human lives took priority, and the building was becoming more dangerous by the second. Jack still carried the scar on his left forearm from the last time he'd defied direct orders, a reminder that the chain of command existed for a reason. But in that moment, Jack couldn't see just a dog. He saw a living being fighting to survive. The German Shepherd mix cowered as Jack approached, smoke inhalation clearly taking its toll. The dog's ribs were visible beneath his dirty coat. He'd been neglected long before the fire started. With gentle movements that belied his urgency, Jack removed his oxygen mask and held it briefly to the dog's muzzle before scooping all 70 pounds of the terrified animal into his arms. "I got you, buddy," Jack whispered, feeling the dog's racing heartbeat against his chest. The animal's eyes, one brown, one startlingly blue, locked onto Jack's face with an intelligence that seemed almost human. The journey back upstairs was a blur of heat, smoke, and the growing sounds of structural beams groaning overhead. Jack had just reached the first floor when he heard the distinctive splintering crack that every firefighter dreads, the sound of load-bearing timbers giving way. "Move!" he yelled to Aiden, who had inexplicably doubled back to find him. The rookie froze at the sight of Jack carrying the dog. Jack's free hand shot out, grabbing Aiden's coat and yanking him toward the door. They burst through the front entrance just as a section of the second floor collapsed behind them, the blast of heat pushing them forward onto the snow-covered lawn. Paramedic Sarah Kaczynski, who'd pulled Jack's brother from a lake after a boating accident 3 summers ago, rushed to them. "Jack, are you hurt?" But Jack's focus remained on the dog now lying still in his arms. "Help him first," he insisted, coughing harshly as the cold air hit his smoke-filled lungs. Dr. Catherine Rivera, the local veterinarian who responded to emergency calls involving animals, was already setting up an oxygen mask designed for pets. She'd pioneered the town's emergency veterinary response program after losing her own dog in a house fire as a child. "He's inhaled a lot of smoke," she said, her hands moving efficiently over the dog's body, checking for burns or other injuries. "But I think he's got a fighting chance." The dog, temporarily named Lucky by the shelter staff, had no microchip and no collar when they removed the broken chain. The house had been rented to new tenants who claimed no knowledge of a dog on the property, though neighbor Elaine Winters insisted she'd seen the animal for weeks. After 3 days in veterinary care for smoke inhalation and minor burns on his paws, Lucky was transferred to the county animal shelter. The shelter was already over capacity after a recent hoarding case had brought in 27 neglected animals. Director Diane Martinez had been forced to make the difficult announcement that they would need to begin euthanizing some animals to make space. Lucky, as an adult dog with health issues, would typically be among the first considered. Jack visited every day after his shift, sitting quietly with Lucky in the shelter's meet and greet room, reading aloud from his pocket copy of The Call of the Wild, the same book his grandfather had read to him during Jack's childhood battle with pneumonia. "He remembers you," Diane remarked on Jack's 3rd visit, as Lucky's tail wagged frantically at the sight of the firefighter. "It's like he knows you saved his life." She hesitated before adding, "Jack, we're making decisions tomorrow about which animals we need to make space for." That evening, Jack sat at his kitchen table with Lisa, their 2 children already in bed. Lisa had met Jack 15 years ago when she'd treated him in the ER after a ceiling collapse had fractured his collarbone. As a pediatric nurse who had seen more than her share of trauma, she understood the toll Jack's job took on him. "I just feel connected to him," Jack admitted, showing her the shelter photos on his phone. "When I found him in that basement, Lisa, he was chained up, abandoned, but he still trusted me to help him." Lisa studied her husband's face, the same expression he'd had after the Thompson twins' asthma attack last year, when he'd stayed at the hospital hours after his shift ended. "Well," she said slowly, "Emma's been asking for a dog since her 8th birthday." The next morning, Jack filled out adoption papers. By afternoon, they'd picked up the dog they decided to rename Rocky, after the fighter who never gave up, and after the rock-like stability he seemed to bring to Jack's nightmares about the fires he couldn't control. Their 2 children, Emma, 14, and Noah, 10, were ecstatic about the new addition to the family. Emma, in the throes of adolescent mood swings that had recently created a wall between her and her parents, immediately appointed herself Rocky's primary caretaker. Noah, struggling with dyslexia and the taunts of schoolyard bullies, found a patient listener who didn't care how slowly he read his homework aloud. Only their elderly cat Whiskers, a rescue himself from Lisa's days volunteering at the university veterinary program, seemed less enthusiastic about the arrangement. The 15-year-old Maine Coon had been the unchallenged ruler of the household until Rocky's arrival. Sarah Kaczynski, the paramedic who had attended the fire, began stopping by with her daughter Zoe, who was in the same class as Emma. The girls would take Rocky for walks while Sarah and Lisa chatted over coffee. "That dog watches Jack like he's memorizing him," Sarah observed one afternoon. "I've never seen anything like it." Within weeks, Rocky had seamlessly integrated into the Thompson household. He slept at the foot of Jack and Lisa's bed, a position that offered a clear view of both the bedroom door and windows. He joined Noah for after-school adventures in the backyard, patiently retrieving the tennis balls that Noah's coordination issues sometimes sent in unexpected directions. Rocky even developed an unlikely truce with Whiskers. After an initial week of standoffs and hissed warnings, the 2 animals were often found napping in patches of sunlight on the living room carpet, careful inches apart, gradually decreasing as weeks passed. What amazed the family most was Rocky's intuition. He seemed to sense moods with uncanny accuracy, bringing his favorite toy to Emma when she came home upset about school drama, resting his head on Lisa's lap after particularly difficult shifts at the children's hospital, or sitting quietly beside Jack on the anniversaries of tough calls, the kinds that never quite leave a first responder's memory. 11 months after Rocky's adoption, the Thompson family settled into their nightly routine. Jack was on his 3rd consecutive night shift, a particularly busy stretch due to a heat wave that had emergency services working overtime. The prolonged temperatures over 100 degrees had resulted in rolling brownouts across the county as the electrical grid struggled to meet the demand from air conditioners running day and night. Lisa had spent her day at the hospital dealing with heat-related emergencies, children left in cars, elderly patients with heat stroke, a school football team practicing without adequate hydration. She tucked the kids into bed, reminded Emma for the 3rd time to stop texting her friends and get some sleep, checked that all doors were locked, and finally crawled into bed herself around 11 p.m. Rocky took his usual spot near the foot of the bed, though Lisa noticed he seemed restless, changing positions several times before settling. She attributed it to the heat. Even with the air conditioning, the upstairs remained warmer than usual. Earlier that week, Rocky had refused to enter the utility room when Lisa was doing laundry, something she'd mentioned to Jack, but they'd both forgotten about amid the chaos of their schedules. The electrician they'd called about the flickering lights in the kitchen had rescheduled twice, citing the influx of emergency calls from the heat wave. At 2:30 a.m., Rocky's behavior suddenly changed. First came the low whine, unusual for the typically quiet dog. Then pacing, circling the bedroom with increasing agitation, nose raised to the air. Lisa, half asleep, mumbled for him to settle down. She'd been dreaming about her patient, 8-year-old Mia, whose asthma had been aggravated by the air quality warnings. But Rocky became more insistent, pulling at the comforter with his teeth, then barking sharply, something he rarely did inside the house. When Lisa finally sat up, irritated and groggy, Rocky grabbed her sleeve between gentle teeth and tugged, clearly wanting her to follow. It was so out of character that Lisa's annoyance immediately transformed into concern. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, the nurse in her responding to the urgency in Rocky's behavior. Something was wrong, and 15 years in pediatric emergency medicine had taught her to trust her instincts. And apparently, her dog's instincts too. Following Rocky into the hallway, that's when she first noticed the faint smell, almost like the electrical burning odor from when her hair straightener had shorted out the previous year. And then she saw the thin wisp of smoke curling under the utility room door at the end of the hall, where the ancient wiring Jack had been meaning to replace connected to their electrical panel. The family had never activated the expensive security system that came with the 100-year-old Victorian they'd purchased 2 years ago. A dream home they'd stretched their budget to afford, postponing repairs like the electrical upgrade to make the mortgage payments. Heart pounding, Lisa rushed to the children's rooms, throwing open doors and shaking them awake with an urgency that brooked no teenage complaints or sleepy questions. "Fire! Get out now! Go to the meeting spot," she commanded, referencing the oak tree across the street they had designated as their emergency gathering place during one of Jack's many family safety drills. Emma immediately grabbed her younger brother's hand, the sibling rivalry of recent months forgotten in the face of danger. Noah, disoriented and frightened, clutched his inhaler, a necessity since his bout with respiratory syncytial virus as a toddler had weakened his lungs. "What about Whiskers?" Emma cried, looking for the elderly cat who usually slept on her bed. "I'll find him," Lisa promised, though her priority had to be getting the children outside. "Go now!" As the children moved toward the stairs, Rocky positioned himself behind them, herding them toward safety, occasionally nudging Noah when the boy slowed. Lisa snatched her phone to call 911, her medical training kicking in as she reported the emergency with clinical precision while scanning for Whiskers. Dispatcher Tanya Williams, who knew Jack personally from their monthly poker nights, recognized Lisa's address immediately. "Engine 17 is already en route from a call on Maple Street," she assured Lisa. "They're 3 minutes out. Jack's with them." Standing under the oak tree with her children and Rocky pressed against her side, Lisa pulled Noah's rescue inhaler from her pocket. Mother's instinct had made her grab it even in the chaos. Emma held Whiskers, having found the cat hiding under the porch. Lisa watched in horror as smoke began pouring from the rear of their home, flames becoming visible through the kitchen window moments later. When the fire trucks arrived 5 minutes later, the first firefighter off the truck was Jack, his face a mask of controlled fear when he recognized his own address on the call display. Behind him, rookie Aiden Maxwell looked equally stricken. He'd eaten dinner with the Thompsons just last Sunday, a regular occurrence since Jack had taken the young man under his wing. "We're all safe," Lisa called to him immediately. "Rocky woke us up." Captain Reynolds divided the crew efficiently, with Miguel leading the interior attack team, while Jack, despite his protests, was ordered to remain outside with his family. "You're too close to this one," Reynolds said firmly, squeezing Jack's shoulder. "Let us do our job." Paramedic Sarah Kaczynski arrived moments later, wrapping blankets around the children despite the warm night. Shock could set in regardless of temperature. She checked Noah's breathing while keeping up a steady stream of comforting conversation, distracting him from the firefighters battling to save his home. As neighbors gathered on the street in various states of undress, Former military nurse Eleanor Peterson took charge of keeping onlookers back, allowing the fire crew to work unimpeded. The community that had embraced the Thompsons since they'd moved in now rallied around them in their moment of crisis. The fire investigator said it was electrical, started in the utility room wall, Jack told Lisa later that night as they sat in his brother David's guest bedroom, the children finally asleep after the trauma of the evening. David, a contractor specializing in historic home renovations, had already promised to help them rebuild, better and safer than before. If it had burned another 15 minutes before being discovered, Jack couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both knew that sleeping humans often succumb to smoke inhalation before ever waking to the danger. The fire marshal had confirmed the smoke detectors, while present, had failed to activate, their batteries dead despite Jack's usual vigilance. Lisa leaned against her husband, both watching Rocky, who lay alert at the bedroom door, still on guard despite his exhaustion. "He saved us tonight," she whispered, stroking Rocky's head as he glanced back at them. "Just like you saved him last year." The story of Rocky's rescue and subsequent heroism spread quickly through the Riverside community. The local newspaper, facing declining subscriptions in the digital age, ran a front-page feature titled "Full Circle, Rescued Dog Becomes Family's Rescuer," complete with a photo of Rocky wearing an honorary firefighter bandana presented to him by Captain Reynolds. Editor-in-chief Margaret Wilson, whose son had been saved from drowning by Jack 3 summers earlier, made sure the story was picked up by national outlets. Dr. Catherine Rivera, the veterinarian who had treated Rocky after his initial rescue, incorporated his story into her ongoing campaign for emergency pet oxygen masks in every fire department nationwide. "Animals save humans every day," she testified before the state legislature. "The least we can do is give them the tools to save animals in return." The fire department used the Thompson family's experience to launch a new fire safety awareness campaign, with Rocky as their mascot. Jack and Rocky visited schools together, teaching children about fire prevention and the importance of having emergency plans. Rocky seemed to understand the gravity of these presentations, sitting attentively as Jack demonstrated stop, drop, and roll techniques to wide-eyed elementary students. Noah, inspired by Rocky's bravery, began overcoming his shyness to share their story with his classmates. His reading improved dramatically as he practiced by reading aloud to Rocky each night. The patient dog never corrected or rushed him. The county animal shelter where Rocky had temporarily stayed saw adoption rates increase by 30% in the months following the story's publication, with many families specifically asking for adult dogs who had been overlooked. Director Diane Martinez expanded their senior dog program, named Rocky's Second Chance, which paired older animals with families and covered partial medical costs. For the Thompson family, the experience transformed their understanding of connection and purpose. What had seemed like a random act of compassion, a firefighter breaking protocol to save an abandoned dog, revealed itself as something more profound, a reminder that ripples of kindness often return in unexpected ways. "I've spent my career believing I was the rescuer," Jack said during an interview for the fire department's newsletter. "But Rocky taught me that sometimes the ones we rescue end up rescuing us right back. Every life has value, and every act of compassion matters." On the 1-year anniversary of the house fire, the rebuilt Thompson home hosted a special celebration, Rocky's official Gotcha Day party. The renovated house now featured state-of-the-art fire safety systems, donated by a security company touched by their story. Among dog-friendly cupcakes and wrapped toys, the family presented Rocky with a custom tag for his collar. On one side was his name and their contact information. On the other, a simple inscription that said it all. "First you were rescued, then you became the rescuer. Forever, family." This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, Don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.